Okay, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 183 with my guest, Jan Williams. Jan was the percussion instructor at the University of Buffalo, and he taught many people, including Bobby Previtt, who So Percussion has worked with. But Jan also worked very closely with people like Julius Eastman at the University of Buffalo, as well as John Cage and Morton Feldman, Pierre Boulez, a whole slew of folks. But Jan is sort of one of the forefathers of our field in terms of contemporary percussion, and it was really enjoyable to get to talk with him and hang and just chew the fat. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jan Williams. I certainly did. Sit back, relax, and enjoy hearing about some history of our contemporary percussion field. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye. Jan Williams. Excuse me. We had a chat with Jason. Was that last week?
Yeah, I think so.
We were talking about Julius Eastman, and Julius is a composer that I have zero experience with prior to really the last couple weeks. Managed to get through all of my studies and never even hear about him. And it was awesome to hear you talk about him. And it dawned on me, it's like, of course, yeah, I need to have Jan Williams on the podcast because you are sort of patient zero for a lot of people in my life, both dead and alive. Everybody from John Cage to Bobby Previtt, you somehow have had some sort of contact with. But you were the professor of percussion at University of Buffalo. Is that correct?
That's right.
And before we get to that and sort of all of your illustrious career, can we back up to like baby Jan Williams and like tell me like what got you into percussion to begin with?
Oh man, you are going back. Oh, it was, I think, a story that mirrors many, many people. Grade school, music ed teacher who didn't know how to play percussion. I do remember that at one point in elementary school, I don't know, must have been fourth grade or so, everybody got to take lessons on an instrument. Mm-hmm. And I remember the teacher taking us into a room where there were all these instruments, string instruments, brass and everything. And you had to decide what one you wanted to do. So, well, what happened was they doled out the instruments in alphabetical by last name of the student. So by the time they got to I had my eye on that French horn, man. That thing would look incredible.
It did look pretty rad. I remember seeing this. I was like, that's the most beautiful one in here.
So by the time they got to me, they were all gone. The only thing left was this rubber pad and a pair of sticks. So, okay, what the heck, give it a shot. My parents were both musicians. My father, a dilettante jazz player, self-taught. My mother taught piano lessons. So music was definitely.
Sorry to interrupt, Jan. Is that what they did for a living, or what else did they do for a living?
No. My father had many jobs in politics. I mean, none of them were either were not professional musicians. My father did weekend club days, played with a local band in Utica, New York. This is a city in central New York, about 100,000 people at that time. Mm-hmm. I don't think it is anymore. Anyway, so when I started, with this with the basics, with this teacher that showed me how to hold the sticks, but after a certain point, it seemed to my father that I was actually I was interested. I was taking it serious. I was working on it. So he got me together with a good teacher in Utica, fortunately. George Claskins is his name. He taught at Syracuse University. He has a book out called Strokes and Taps, which is actually used, I think, was used. It is still available. Anyway, George was great. He was serious, and I would go to his house on Saturdays for my lessons. And I mean, started with rudimental drumming, that was all about, 3 minutes, 5 minutes to do the long roll from home.
I chatted I chatted with John Beck, and we were talking about rudimental drumming and the history and the sort of, was it the National Association of Rudimental Drummers?
Yes.
NARD. And
NARD, right.
And Can you just tell me a little bit like, so what year was this, or what years would this have been?
This would have been this would have been 1950,
So,
around 1950. Let's see, I was 10 years old in 49.
okay.
Uh, so around then is when by then it was established that I was going to continue doing this and taking the lessons and studying more seriously.
Well,
And luckily, George was a really good technician in terms of technique, and everything worked great. He played in the Utica Civic Orchestra. So early on, he invited me to come and listen to rehearsals and sit in. And eventually, I played with the group with him. He played timpani. He studied with, like many people, with Goodman over, for few lessons, I think. And so actually, he was a very good timpanist and a very good drummer. But I didn't do mallets at all at that point.
well, that's why I was asking, because when I went into fifth grade, the situation you described as your first week, I called it an instrument petting zoo. Like the very first time you see the gymnasium with all the instruments, it was a little bit more. I had more choice in It wasn't alphabetical order, but there was a like pretty clear where boys went here, girls went here, like everybody went to where, and I took home a snare drum.
Right.
But there was no mallets involved. Can you talk a little bit? But it's getting better. It's now like part of the educational
Oh,
system.
yes, most
For
definitely.
you, can you give us context? I mean, this is 5 years after World War II ended. I mean, like, I'm not saying this to like make you feel old, but I do want to sort of put this stuff in important historical context. What was like? What was in the air in 1950 when, like, why rudimental drumming? Why was that the thing that was the bedrock of what is now a pretty big burgeoning tree of contemporary percussion music? But like, why was the rudimental snare drumming the sort
I
of?
think it was basically MENC and NISMA, New York State School Music Association. Their annual local, uh, uh, not competitions, but you'd go and play and you graded, right? So your grade 6 solo was the top, and you walked in. So you played the Shinstein, some rudimental solo, or Wilcoxon,
Mhm.
or and then you got graded, and you got from a 1 to a 6. And so I think the rudimental component of it was very much the most. I mean, some people might have played a little xylophone solo. I didn't, but maybe that was also possible. But it was certainly the rudimental thing was the basis for that. And you worked really hard on the rudiment and playing this set of sort of required things you had to play. And then they would ask you to play certain rudiments. And then you would play your solo.
How much
And
of
so that was basically why that was so. And then NARD was definitely involved in this.
and how closely related is this to? And did you ever serve in the military?
I did not.
You did not. Like, that was one of the things, the way when John talks about it, like a lot of this stuff is very closely related to military practices and drumming within the military. And that, like, when I don't know, just like looking at John, like, of course that's what he took from the military. And when contemporary percussion was sort of becoming a thing, like in educational systems,
Right.
I'm sort of like, when I'm looking back at the butterfly effect of all of, like, World War II had an impact on how we study percussion music. And my theory is that I think just the byproduct of American culture being so closely tied to the military in the 50s, post World War II, like, I think
I never thought of it that way, but I definitely that is something that could have quite have been influenced, because that rudimental thing, we studied the history. We went back from the early days of the rudiments, when they started, how they started, Revolutionary War, the drummer boys, the whole thing. So that was kind of, the military. But my personal experience, the military aspect did not have such a strong role
yeah,
as it did, with John and his.
yeah.
but it was definitely an influence, I'm sure.
If the American military was moved forward on the battlefield by 4 mallet marimba playing back in the day,
Yeah,
our situation would be much different.
yeah.
Okay, well, so let's keep moving along here. When did you realize percussion was a viable path for you? Like, you're looking at your mom and your dad, both are amateur musicians. Maybe music was a path that made sense to them, but like it wasn't their full-time gig. When for you did it feel like, oh yeah, this is my baby, this is what I want to do?
Well, this came as actually a kind of aha moment, like you see in these crime shows, all of a sudden, aha, and so it wasn't. So the thing is, I did music all through high school. I did it all the time. I was very much involved in it, but it was a kind of like, it was just what I did. I mean, I played in the band. I played in did like club dates with my father. My father got me my first professional gig on New Year's Eve, filling in. I was 15, filling in for some guy that dropped out. Drummer couldn't do it, and my father said, "Oh no." So they called my father, and he said, "Oh, my son's a good drummer. Why don't you take him?" But and he says, "Okay, great, $15 for New Year's Eve, fine." And my father, "Oh no, he's much better than that. 25. You got to
It's
pay
like
him."
you and
And I
Mozart.
didn't know. This was going on. So
You
I
and
walked into the
you and Mo
Ritz.
sorry, you and Mozart both have dads that are like
Yeah,
really trying to
yeah.
hawk them out
No,
there to the
no,
public.
no. You got to pay 25. So it was the Ritz, Club Ritz, and I remember. And I was 15. We had to go in through the back door, But anyway, so I sort of did this stuff, but at the same time, both my teacher and my parents, to a degree, said, if you're thinking about music as a career, can you do anything else? Could you possibly maybe? Because it's very difficult to make a living in music as a career. So they said, how? So I said, well, I'm in high school, I'm good at physics, I'm good at math, I'm interested in electronics, and I was a ham radio operator. So I had that kind of interest. I said, oh, great. They said, oh, great. So why don't you best do that? And then you can always do your music. So I took them up on it, and some of my friends, a couple of my other buddies, were going to Clarkson College of Technology up in Potsdam, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so I applied, I got accepted, and I went up to Potsdam after high school.
What was the name of the place again? What was the name of that school?
It was Clarkson College at
Clarkson.
that time. Now it's Clarkson University.
Okay.
It's the other school in Potsdam, besides SUNY.
Okay.
And let's see, I got up there. I lasted till November. It was not for me.
Mm.
And back then, these technical schools, it was not that hard to get in because the whole way they operated was they let a lot of people in and weeded them out quickly, the ones that were really serious.
It's like
Percussion.
Percussion. That's how Percussion
I
operates.
didn't know from calculus, and I was way over my head.
Oh.
So then, simultaneous with me thinking about it, I made a mistake. What am I doing here? Kind of thing. In Potsdam, there was a movie theater, and the SUNY there, I think, was responsible. They sponsored a series of concerts there. So Dave Brubeck Trio comes in there playing downtown. It was probably October or whatever of that year. That would have been 57.
Mm.
So I go to this concert, I hear Joe Morello and, Dave Brubeck play this incredible concert. And I'd always listen to a lot of jazz in my bringing up. I mean, that was in the house. That's what they was playing all the time. So that's my aha moment. Aha. I made a mistake. I blew it, but I can recoup this. I'm getting out of here. I'm going home. I'm practicing. I'm auditioning for the Eastman School and whatever. Worked the rest of the year in my grandfather's greenhouse. And so that's how it happened, really, when I got serious. So I auditioned at Eastman for Bill Street, Professor Street, and got in, not playing a single note on a mallet instrument. Timpani and snare drum. I had good technique on both, good ears for timpani, and had started practicing the Gardner book, the mallets, had started with that stuff. Played a few glockenspiel parts in the orchestra and band, but not really, But you could get into Eastman then without any mallet playing. This was 1957.
There's a lot of students right now, Jan, who are just like, don't you dare tell me that, Jan Williams, because they're all out there learning mallet instruments. Because Michael Burritt teaches there now, so it's
So I'm with Bill Street in his studio, and he's smoking a cigar. He's got this fabulous suit on, dressed to the nines. He was great, and with the Gardner book, and scales and stuff, and I'm still playing. I was playing in like the second university orchestra or whatever. I was playing. But it was obvious to me that this is great. This is what I wanted to do. Well, I was doing fine. I was doing good. I had a scholarship, a partial scholarship, I think, even after I got there. And I'm from Utica, New York. Okay, so Rochester's is only 70 or 80 miles away. It's kind of just a little bigger Utica. As a kid, my father and we went to New York at least 2 or 3 times a year, specifically to hear jazz. Basin Street East, Birdland. We went every night to a jazz club in New York for 3 or 4 days, and my mother went shopping at Macy's. So, then that was the thing we did every year. We knew a lot of people. We used to hang out Joe Harbor's Spotlight Bar, which was directly opposite from Birdland. It's not there anymore. The building's gone. But it was a little bar where all the musicians used to hang out after the shows or their gigs, right? So we would be there 2, 3 in the morning. I'm sitting at the bar with Errol Garner, shaking his hand. I'm working, I'm hearing all these guys. I'm trombonist. Last name was Gold. I played in the pits, in the musicals, but all musicians. And this was like, and then my father and I would go someplace, all night place, and have breakfast at 4 a.m. I mean, it was fabulous, right? So this is what I did. So when I'm in Rochester, I'm thinking, the lure of the city it's pretty strong for me. I mean, Rochester's okay, but I remember the depth of stuff that was happening. And and at the same time, I read an article in New York, I think it was in Life magazine or something about this concert that happened at John Cage concert retrospective or whatever in '58 that was happening in right. So that concert was in 1958, the spring of '58, 25-year retrospective John Cage concert at Town Hall, and I'm in my second semester, early 1958. And I hear about this concert that was written up, because here's all these guys in tails playing on wash pans and pot tubs and stuff. And there's this, I think Nicholas Slimsky wrote a review of the thing, and I'm thinking, whoa. And the prominent person mentioned was Paul Price, because he was the guy at Manhattan, and many of his students played in that concert. I think. A lot of his students were the groups that played in the concert. Paul was involved in that concert heavily. So I said, oh, Manhattan School, let me look into maybe a transfer thing would work, and get me to New York. So I worked on that, was accepted, and went to New York in '58, summer of '58, right? To start at the Manhattan School. I had a bad bachelor of music thing there. Studying with Paul. So when I arrived, it was Max Newhouse and Ray DeRoche and John Bergamo. I think they were like a year ahead of me, maybe. So they were there. So it's established. Eddie
You just mentioned,
Cornelius,
Jan, I'm really sorry. You just mentioned a bunch of people who I like obsessed about their recordings when I was in college. Like all of those, like is the New Jersey percussion players. That's not correct. All of those George Crumb recordings, like with Ray DeRoche playing, it's like that name was like I obsessed over those recordings, and it's like he's just your buddy in school. That just is. I'm sorry.
That's right, because Ray was one of the original members of Werner and Solberger's group, the group of contemporary music at Columbia. He was their percussionist. Mm-hmm. Werner wrote the piece for him, Janissary music for him, and he premiered it and Ray did the symphony of Werner's. And so Ray was very active with that group. And Bergamo came as a jazz drummer to Manhattan. Mm-hmm. He hadn't studied mallets either, or keyboards either. I don't think seriously until he got to Manhattan. So I was like accepted right away. Max was a good friend. They were all a great friend, and they all helped. And right from the get-go, it was like, okay, first rehearsal Saturday, percussion ensemble, 2 to 5. We're doing this, we're doing that. And Paul it was immediately obvious to me how dedicated Paul was, and how seriously he took it, and how demanding he was of students that they take it seriously. And you gotta, if your technique is lacking in a certain thing, you gotta, because we're doing this repertoire. So it was all like repertoire based. Mm. It was and Paul's mission of creating a repertoire percussion ensemble was, that was his mission for his whole career, starting in Illinois University.
Well, but just to state the obvious for students who maybe don't know about Paul, again, to put this in context, like there were no percussion ensemble pieces. That's why he had to put a mission behind it, because there just wasn't. It's not like you could find arrangements of Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition and do that, but like there was not a whole body of original rep.
No, there were those persuasive percussion recording, pop arrangements of pop stuff that were popular when LPs came out and hi-fi came in to vogue. But Paul was more interested in a serious repertoire analogous to string quartet or whatever, serious music. So you want to say for percussion. So you remember when I gave the talk at the Institute a few years ago, I talked about this whole thing. So if you don't mind, I'll just
go
back and do some of that again. But in any case, Paul early on met Henry Cowell when he was a student at the Boston in Boston at NEC, and this is before the war. He had met Cowell, and they talked, and he knew about this stuff. Then he became very interested in Cowell's music, Ostinata Pianissimo. He heard about cage quartets, so he had an inkling he knew a little bit about this stuff. Then the war comes along, he gets drafted, he spends 4 years in the service, fighting in friggin' Pacific, I think he was a medic, actually.
Paul Price was.
Price was. And he comes back in 45 or 46, goes back to school, Cincinnati, I think it's a master's degree, rekindles his friendship and correspondence with Cowell. Cowell introduces Kate to Harrison and Paul get and all of a sudden Harrison says, I got this trunk full of stuff, music that we did in, the Cornish School in LA and San Francisco in the 40s, 41, 42, 43. I got the stuff earlier even from Joanna Bayer and from Gerald Strang. Anyway, I got the stuff you wanted because nobody's doing it. So, and Paul said, okay, great. At this point, Paul, I think, is at the University of Illinois. So he's got all this stuff and does the first performances of many of these things. First U.S. performer of the Rhythmicas, with
Rolled On, yeah.
Rolled On Rhythmicas, pieces by Cuban composers that Cage knew and gave. Cage had these scores, he gives them the prize. The two Rhythmicas, he starts doing all this stuff. The Harrison Fugue, the Cage constructions, 1, 2, 3.
Are those pieces? Is it William Russell? Those three Cuban.
William Russell.
Cuban sketches.
He was also in San Francisco, I think, area at that point. But he was in that group. And they shared their pieces, and Russell was interested in jazz, so he had a little bit different background. He ended up at the Preservation Hall in New Orleans as the archivist and whatever. But we did all those pieces, and Paul recorded a lot of them, the very early recordings. So Urania Records, Manhattan Percussion Ensemble, which was Manhattan School Percussion Ensemble, basically, with a few other players from New York. I mean, Colegrass was in New York then, so he played on, Urania Records, and Paul started doing these recordings. And at this time, it was hi-fi LPs were just coming, hi-fi, right? So the producers were interested in that because percussion, big sound. And
you mentioned persuasive percussion. There's the Enoch Light Orchestra is also really famous for when this hi-fi stuff came out. They would do like arrangements of Oye Como Va or something and like pan the bongos really far right and the drum set be up here and the clarinet when it came in would be like way over there, and it was so you could tune your hi-fi system. And because if you were an audiophile, you would buy these records to specifically set the panning on your system. Like that's a thing. There's like records that were made for that. Like kids today, when they have MP3s and and you're listening just on headphones, like that doesn't happen anymore. Like, but there's a whole cottage industry of like people who did this.
Yes, and this persuasive percussion, and the guy in Chicago.
Is it Enoch Light?
No, the other guy that taught it.
I think I know who you're talking about. It's good driving crazy now.
It'll come to me. Anyway, this was an anathema to the price. He said, whoa, no. They might have big record contracts with Victor and Capitol and all those. Right. But this is not the rep we got to be doing. We need original music for the instrument by, hopefully non-percussionist composers of the day, but in order to build, and since you as you tell the students, you as percussionists know the instruments and the genres better than most composers writing at the time. I want to, write pieces yourself for your own concert. You're doing a graduate, a master's recital. Why don't you write a piece? Write a piece for Max, or write a piece for John, or John write a piece for Jan, for the recital. And that's what happened. At that time, Paul had his music for percussion publishing because right from the get-go, he said this stuff has got to be published because otherwise, how's it going to get out? So he started publishing music from his colleagues at the University of Illinois, Edward Miller, and these guys that were Colegrass, for example. And also, so John's Bergamo's piece for a timpani solo he wrote for Max got published. My solo for timpani got published. Max's a book on four mallet. Max did a book on four mallet technique very interesting book. You should pick it up just from the standpoint of the approach.
What's it called?
For Mallet Studies, I think. It's Max Newhouse. It's available for music for percussion. The complete music for percussion catalog is available from Cola Voce Music. It's online, and they represent a whole bunch of publishers. If you look at Plymouth Music or Music for Percussion, the whole catalog, you can still buy it. You can still buy my piece, you can buy any of these. And Max's piece is Max, I remember going to his studio, he had he would measure the distance between the mallets that you could possibly spread in one hand, one hand, how far we played, the traditional grip, and not the marimba.
Stevens grip or whatever.
Stevens,
yeah.
In here,
Yeah.
And so, he would be measuring these distances and figuring out just how, and designing these exercises anyway, take a look at it.
I will. Some of those method books back then, this is also too, this was the beginning. When I talk about NARD or anything, when I look at what my educational system, the things that I was sort of just took for granted, method books, you all sort of spearheaded that too. All at once developing a thing and then realizing, oh my God, we have to catalog this so that it goes out. That started with you. And when I think of that method book, I want to check out, but Saron, the Saron snare drum Etudes.
Right.
And I was like, okay, cool. I only knew of that one. Then I was teaching at NYU about 3 years ago, and I heard somebody on a vibraphone. And I was like, that is so stupid. Why are you playing a snare? And I walk in, and it's the same method book, just on mallets. The same exact rhythms, everything, just with pitches.
Wow,
and I thought,
I never realized that. I never used it.
Yeah, I didn't either. It's two method books. Every etude's the exact same rhythm. One's for snare, one's on vibraphone. Yeah. And I was like, now, is it the best sounding music in the world? No. But conceptually, that's awesome that a student could get the same method book and apply it to every instrument, and you could all play together. It would all work. That's so cool. And anyway, just to say, I think percussionists, it feels like we're these weird band of tinkerers and hoarders and collectors. Somebody, the idea that was it Lou Harrison with the trunk of music just driving around? This stuff isn't neatly organized. This guy is a hoarder driving around. He's got cats and everything else. But to me, when I think of how forward thinking or how established we all think we are now, that's only a person ago that happened. All of this, I don't know. I'm just fast. I'm not ignoring you, by the way. I'm just writing down all of this stuff.
No, it's fine. I did want to mention also John Bergamo's method book called Style Studies. It's also published by Music for Percussion. Okay. And it was the ideas for these books basically probably exclusively came from Price, because he said, okay, this is something needs to be addressed in a logical manner. The different styles of of percussion writing that composers are using these days, whether it's Ramadi's free graphic music, whether it's Carter's timpani pieces, whether it's I don't know, but John made little etudes reflecting the various styles of percussion writing at the time. It's called Style Studies.
I'll look that up.
Also usually $3 or $4. And I think that these books now, students could get something from them. Actually.
Did Paul Price, did he write a series of bass drum solos?
Yes. Okay. And the reason for that was he was ticked off. He was not happy about going back to the NARD rudimental influence and concentration at these MENC conferences, all state, all country, or whatever. He wanted to change that as well by having students be able to play and get graded on playing music other than rudimental snare drum solo and some scales on the xylophone, right? And or some simple transcription of something on the xylophone. So he said, okay, so since they're grades 1 through 6, how about I write some simple pieces for bass drum that a grade 2 or something that students could use to demonstrate their abilities to play this particular instrument or that. I think he did snare drum solos, he did bass drum solos, triangle, I don't know, maybe even did triangle. He has a method book, by the way, Paul has a method book for triangles, castanets, and tambourine. Triangle, castanets, and tambourine. It's pretty darn good, I'm telling you. I don't know why. I don't even know if that's still available.
Do you know Todd Meehan?
Sorry?
Do you know who Todd Meehan is?
No.
That warms my heart, Jan. No, I'm just kidding. Todd's a really good friend of mine. He was one of the founding members of So Percussion, and he teaches down at Baylor right now.
Okay.
He just wrote a method book a couple years ago for triangle, castanets, and tambourine. And so I want to text him and be like, Paul Price beat you.
Oh, yes.
40 years ago.
This is probably like 60s or whatever.
Jan, this is, we're only like 30 minutes into this and my head is exploding with all this awesome information. And just like, I want to say too, that this is helping me. I've been doing a lot of conversations with Steve Reich, and when I talk to Steve Schick and John Beck, it's like all of these pieces of the puzzle are starting to be put into place in really great ways. So I just am grateful for that. Thank you. Now, can I ask you, what was it like to teach Bobby Previtt?
Oh.
So sorry, that's sort of a joke question, but not like you also, your educational influence in the percussion world is not insignificant, and I'm curious. Bobby is one person who has worked in depth with, and he talked about you non-stop, like almost to the point where it's like, yeah, blah blah blah. Jan is great. Yeah, he's the best. Okay, Bobby, wrap it up. Like. Can you talk a little bit about your time as a teacher and sort of like what was your experience like when you first got a teaching job, and like what did you learn, what did you realize that you didn't know as soon as you started teaching?
I knew I didn't particularly, that I was flying by the seat of my pants.
Me too. Okay, good.
In terms of like teaching, right? It started when I was a student in Manhattan. I earned a few bucks. I taught at a private boys' school in Manhattan, snare drum for the kids, and I taught at the Brooklyn Conservatory. I was their percussion teacher there for probably a couple of years. I remember getting off the train at Flatbush Avenue. The first thing I do is go into the drugstore there and get a chocolate, an egg cream, before I went in to teach. Anyway. But I was relying on my background, of course, from my teacher early on. That's the way I approached it with students. And then, when I came to Buffalo, right, I didn't come as a faculty member, right? I came to the university as a member of this group, Creative Associates, which was created in 1964. By Lucas Foss, the composer, and then chairman of the music department, whose name was Alan Sapp, also a composer. So they started this group in '64. It was Lucas's second year as music director of the Buffalo Philharmonic. During the first year, he got together with Alan. They came up with this idea, applied to the Rockefeller Foundation, get a grant to start a new music group at the university. They didn't quite know how it was going to shape up, but they had this idea. Lucas had friends at the Rockefeller Foundation, and at that time, Rockefeller was giving money to various universities to start groups, actually. So the university got this grant of like $200,000, about $200,000 in 1964, right? It's a piece of change, as Morty felt.
It's a piece of change now,
It's a piece of change now, but. So they, so then, okay, now we got to get, people here to be in this group. So Lucas relied on people he knew, and he called me. And Bergamo was a Fromm Fellow at Tanglewood. and Lucas was very active at Tanglewood, and this is the early 60s, right? And so John knew Lucas and started working with Lucas at Tanglewood. And so Lucas hired John. Okay, it was a 1-year grant, possibly renewable for a second year. The pay was $4,000 a year or $5,000 if you were married. John gets hired, and then through word of mouth, Lucas heard of other people from Europe, a lot of Europeans, Carol Plantin Moore, the soprano, who was American, but was in, anyway, it was a very diverse group, 16 players and composers, and what we call the hyphenated, the pianist composer, the percussionist composer, the violinist. So we all show up, and so they needed a second percussionist, and so Lucas goes to John and says, John, who do you want? Who should we hire for? And so you should get Jan Williams. And so there were perfunctory semi-audition tapes. They held auditions in New York at Judson Hall, but they didn't have any percussionists, so I had to submit tapes. Whether they ever listened to these tapes, I have no idea. I played Mamadi, I played Carter, I played solo piece of couple of solo pieces of John and some other New York composers. And I get this, I do my recital, my final master music recital on May 15th, 1964. And on that day, I get a telegram. Telegrams in those days. You got a telegram.
That's like some kid right now getting like, I got a message in a bottle.
Right.
A bottle floated down the creek, and I grabbed it, and it was for me.
At the door, and just to give him a tip. And said, you're invited to be a member of this group. Well, I had misgivings. I had second thoughts because I was 5 years in New York at that time. Diane, my wife, the violist, got married in '62. I was playing with Stokey, in the American Symphony. I was playing in the first couple of years of the American Symphony. I was playing in the section with Paul Price. I never auditioned for Stokey because Paul Price was the head of the section, and Stokey and Paul were real close. And Stokowski said, Paul, whoever you want to use, but fill out the section, go ahead. So he hired some of his students, and I got to play a lot. In fact, I even played timpani, subbed on timpani for Elaine Jones when she was freelancing, doing something else. She couldn't make it, and I actually got to play the Tchaik 4 with Stokey, which was on timpani, anyway. I thought, do I want to go to Buffalo? Really?
They have good chicken wings. The Anchor Bar. The Anchor Bar wasn't as famous then?
No, 64 they started. When I started the year we got here, I think. Anyway, I was working with a lot of the groups in New York at the time. That was not the number there are these days, right? There was the group of contemporary music at Columbia. There was the Max Polikoff series, Music of Our Times at the YMHA. There was Gunther Schuler's 20th Century Innovations concert at Carnegie Recital Hall. There was the group at Columbia University. And I got to play a lot of times, like on these concerts, for these series, Gunther's concerts. I didn't work with the Columbia group that much. I didn't do one or two concerts with them, but I did do a lot of work with these other groups. So I was getting my feet wet playing contemporary music, which I wanted to do by that point. It was like that, okay, this is it. I mean, I'm not going to play in an orchestra, not interested. The repertoire, I want to, this new stuff is too exciting. So I didn't want to leave New York. But I went to Paul. I said, Paul, look, I got this problem. I got this, I can go up there. He said, well, what's the gig? I'm telling you. He said, well, I said, we go up there. It's a group of 16 players. It's a new music group. We get together, we rehearse new pieces and present 5 concerts a year at the Art Gallery in Buffalo. No teaching involved, although we were like graduate. We were like research fellows, only instead of research, it was creative. As a creative associate, not a research associate. Okay. So that's what we do. No teaching. And we live it. He said, "You're nuts, go." I mean, it sounded like a most incredible opportunity, right? So, all right. So we went, and fortunately, Diane auditioned for an opening in a Buffalo Phil and got it. So we had both those jobs. We were a little better off financially than some of the other people. But 1 year, and that was John and I, and then for 2 years, John and I, and then John left to go to University of Washington, state of Washington, and they asked me for a third year, and then but I must say, in terms of teaching, you were asking about teaching. As soon as John and I got there, having come from Manhattan, where we were like playing, rehearsing percussion pieces, working with each other, so we have to form a percussion. There's no percussion program. There was no percussion program. The timpanist from the Buffalo Philharmonic, who was 70 at the time, taught some, but okay. It was a music department now, not a conservatory. There was no illusions of that. It was a music department in a huge university. I don't like Princeton, but not like Princeton. Wasn't a school of music. Mm-hmm. So we said, we got to do something. So we put out a general call to the student body. Anybody that plays drums or percussion, you want to play in a group, come on. So we get these students coming in for pre-med, the liberal arts, so a couple of music students. Mm-hmm. And we started doing pieces. Luckily, the band director at the time, very good friend, we're still friends. He had previously, before I got there, wanted to do something with his band percussion section. So he had already bought some of the music percussion stuff. So I had a few pieces we could do right away. So we started doing that, not private teaching, but and we did it gratis. It was just something we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Not part of our gig officially. So then in 1967, after being there 3 years as a creative associate and doing these concerts in Buffalo and New York, we repeated them all in New York. That was set up after we got there because we went to Lucas and said, "Lucas, it's great. We do these concerts in Buffalo, but we're young and we're nice to get some New York City exposure." And so he makes a phone call again to Isaac Stern or somebody at Carnegie, and he said, "All right." So we had the evenings for the music. We repeated the concerts in New York, and so that's what we were doing. I'm not teaching. Teaching wasn't it. But then when John had left and another creative associate percussionist came, we hired. Always had two. But I was always the one, and then there was another. Mm-hmm. The chairman of the department then, Alan Satt, the same chairman that formed this group with Lucas, comes to me, calls me in his office one day. "Hey, Jen, come in." He said, "Listen, George Don is retiring. Would you like the faculty position?" I said, but I said, only if I can continue to do this creative associate, the stuff for the creative associate as part of my load, was that. Mm-hmm. So I said, "Oh yeah, just teach private students. Want to do an ensemble, great. And then you do your creative associate stuff." So I said, "Yeah, great." So he goes into the next faculty meeting, and he says, at the end of the meeting, "Old business. Anybody got any old business?" "Oh, I almost forgot. I want to introduce our new faculty member, Jan Williams, percussion." I knew everybody in the room, but Jan Williams is a percussionist. "Oh, great. Congratulations." "Yeah, but search committees? Any talk to anybody else about this?"
Not even a telegram?
Nothing. It's just like,
not even a balloonitic, nothing?
This is another thing that's going to really rile up your students listening that are looking for gigs in universities.
The process is much more calcified now, Jan, than it was when you were.
So I said, okay. And I was free to do it any way I wanted to do it. And there was no mission to to train students for any particular, direct students to any particular path, because a lot of times there were not majors and majors both. I mean, 14, 15 students, or some were majors, some weren't, so I hadn't undecided, whatever.
Right.
But my teaching methods were always, well, what do you want to do? I mean, let me see you play. And I think, if you're serious about keyboards, this is what you should do with this kind of thing. And our timpani, and I introduced them to all this stuff, the technical aspects of the various areas. And then, of course, there was the percussion ensemble. And so that was really the focus again, because that was my focus in Manhattan. That was the focus where I was teaching, right from John to so we always did a concert every semester, rehearsed all semester, and did these concerts with students. So Bobby walks in as I don't know if you heard about the music department. He was in psychology. I don't know.
What was it?
Pre-dentistry or something.
Yeah, it was not music at all. It was something.
No. It was just and he heard about.
Came in late, I think, to this.
And he was a little older, and he comes in and he talks to me.
Let's just say it's dentistry, because that would be hilarious if if you walked into the dentist's office and Bobby walked in, I'd be like, nope, I'm out of here. I am not letting that man inside of my mouth with any sharp object.
Diane, do you remember? Diane thinks that's right.
Okay.
So he comes in and says, I'm a jazz drummer and I play drum set, but I'd like to take some lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, okay, I'm not a drum set person really. I mean, I play drum set, but it's not an area of expertise for me. Mm-hmm. I said, but come in. We were really open. You seem like an interesting guy. You don't know quite what you want to do. And here's the music department. We got all this contemporary music going on, and we got the percussion ensemble. So you got a lot of stuff to listen to and absorb, and maybe you'll decide. And if you're playing, you really should learn to play some keyboards. I mean, come on. So here's the way you hold the stick with respect to scales and the whole routine to introduce them to it. But if they were more interested in something else, it could go that way, right? They had to do a recital if you were a major and senior recital. That could be anything. You could play drum set. And so Bobby was around at a time when there was a lot of activity with composers coming and going, because we were doing their music, and Cage was there a lot, and Harrison came through several times, and composers from New York, Feldman was around, and it was like that was what was going on there, okay? And percussion-wise, we were supporting that with our students.
Were you aware at the time, or were students aware at the time of how lucky they were, or were you all pretty siloed off and just like this was normal for you, like this was your status quo?
This was normal. We didn't think much of it, because we were tasked with learning this music. I mean, that's what we were. This is what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to play these pieces and learn them and do them in the best, as well as we could possibly do it. The bottom line being is a composer who's standing right there, happy with what you did or not. And if he wasn't, but he expressed this in a civil manner, which some did and some didn't. We were happy anyway, we took it as a learning experience, but it was like work, perform it, evaluate, next. What's next? Give me the next piece, go down the line. Because here's concert 1 in October, concert 2 in December, concert 3 in May, of the creative associate thing. And then also the percussion ensemble thing. Mm-hmm. Inviting composers we knew or who were in residence to write pieces.
Well, when we were talking about Julius Eastman last week with Jason, Jason went back and was reading some of the stories about, Bobby Previtt told a story when we first met him, and it turns out it was about, he didn't tell us at the time, but it was about a Julius Eastman rehearsal, I think for maybe not Feminine, or was it Stay On It? I don't remember which one, where he tells his story where he's just like, there's too many notes, and somebody, maybe Julius came over and was just like, just lay out, like,
Yeah, that was feminine, I think.
yeah, like,
I think it was.
but it's
That's
interesting.
not too many notes, so it couldn't have been feminine. I don't know. It was some piece.
But it's to like when I think of I don't know. To me, it's just interesting because right now, I'm shocked by how siloed we can all still be, even though we have access to everything. But for you having sort of crossed paths with people like everybody from John Cage to Morton Feldman and then Julius Eastman, like as a teacher, were you consciously trying to harness any of that, or was it just like too chaotic and you're like, as long as the students aren't like throwing up on themselves, today was a great day? Like what was your, how did you envision your role as a teacher, and how did that role as a teacher change over time, or did it?
Using Bobby as a example. I don't think I ever took Bobby aside and said, Bobby, I just want to make sure you understand what you have here. You have access to these components. You're able to hang out with them, and these guys are like really important. And so you want to make sure that you're taking into no conversation like that ever happened. Whatever happened by naturally things, interactions happening, connection with pieces, problems coming up that needed to be solved in terms of a particular piece where you could interact directly with the composer to address the problem, figure out what not sure what you, and with Julius, that was very often the case. Like, what are you, is this what you're like? Oh, okay, that's what, that kind of thing. Or is it like just a page full of notes that you have to woodcheck, and no question, put the metronome on and boom, learn them. So I don't think it was, did I try to harness that? Not in a really overt sort of conscious way, I don't think. It was just the milieu as a small town. And it's, you know what I mean? We were like close. We all lived there. We hung out together. We went to the Anchor Bar for wings. We went to after concert parties at Morton Feldman's apartment with Elliot Carter. So it was like we were living together. It was like a commune, not a commune, but I mean, you know what I mean. Yeah. It's a small enough city so that you'd run into Morty on Elmwood Avenue. We would go into the store. He didn't drive, and I drove him up to the university all the time because he was virtually blind. So talking, in and out contact stuff, and problems came up with the creative associates, the funding, the blah, 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 and all this outlined in Renee Levine's book, the sound, This Life of Sounds, which I told Jason about. If you haven't read it, you might find it interesting. This Life of Sounds by Renee Levine Packer, Packer, published by Oxford University Press. It's called This Life of Sounds, Evenings for New Music in Buffalo, or whatever, something like that. This is a book which outlines the whole experience.
Awesome. I will check that out for sure.
There are photos in here, a lot of photos. And the book is very interesting because a lot of it is anecdotal. Story.
That's my favorite type of history anyway.
Story. Here. There's Renee and David Tudor on stage at the. There's all kinds of this book. There's this guy, Peter Kotick.
No, I don't know him.
Oh, you don't know Peter? That's the M Ensemble.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
well, let me ask you, Gene.
I think you would find that interesting.
I will check that out. One of the things that's dawned on me that is sort of like, one of the things, just if I'm just looking at data points when I was a student growing up, and you just looked at the amount of living composers your colleagues work with on a daily basis versus you or me, for example, it started to set into me that I just, by default of being a percussionist, am around more living composers than, say, a violinist or a pianist. Um, I don't have an answer here. This is more of a question. Like, what do you think that does to percussionists? What's the benefit? Like, why are we around? I'm sort of, maybe the answer is obvious, but what is it about percussionists that sticks us around? Why is Julius Eastman and why is John Cage and why is Morton Feldman, three completely different people, somehow gravitationally pulled towards percussion?
Yeah, it's because of us, the percussionists, I guess, and the medium that had only come to view to a lot of these composers. From the 1960s, they had no concept of what could be done. Mm-hmm. And again, Paul's attitude was, well, if a composer doesn't know the capabilities of a particular percussion instrument, help them discover this, not tell them what to write, but make sure they understand the vast scope of possibilities they may not be aware of. So that's to kind of encourage composers to write. But I think it's just, the nature of the very late but kind of explosive development of the repertoire at a particular time. And then, again, 1950, say, whatever. We're including those pieces from the 40s, of course, from John and those people. But I think that was so impressive that both composers and percussion students of percussion students, like Bobby Barrett, became aware of much larger world out there that they can be involved in, listen to, and engage with, and question, and and I was always so impressed by how many students didn't listen to music. I said, what do you listen to these days? Oh, do you know this piece? Do you know that? No. It's like, wait a minute, you're a student of music and you're not listening to music constantly, all day long, every minute listening. So I think that...
Jan, I want to be a professional wrestler. That doesn't mean I'm going to wrestle all day, every day. I mean, come on.
No, I'm just saying, listen, be aware of what's going on. So, in other words, just to open your ears to other things besides country western music or whatever, symphony repertoire. I mean, but in the end, you need to sort of be interested in originality, and as a concept of originality as a raison d'etre. I mean, as a piece is original to me. Then I just heard two new pieces yesterday sent to me by Kalia Hakosalo, this Finnish percussionist who I'm corresponding with because he's got a lot of questions like you. So we're going back and forth. But he sent me two pieces his group played. Piece with two flexotones and piano. Totally notated, completely. The sound was like a totally new sound to me. They don't sound like flexotones, first of all. They are. I mean, but in terms of the way the piece is put together, too, it was very, very unique and interesting, original to me. The other piece was for electronics, noise sound, totally rhythmically, score online, you can follow. Totally something I'd never heard before. This piques my interest, always has. So,
well, when you mention Bobby, I mean, one of the things about Bobby that when he talked about you all the time, he talked about you in this. It was weird. He never said like, "Oh, Jan is the reason I play drums like this," or "Jan is the reason I write music like this." It was always like, my music, I'm a better composer because, like, he always talked about it in the context of composing. And I think because you threw him in that deep end, with people like he was in the room with Julie Simpson, he was in the room with John Cage, he was in the room with Morton Feldman, and somehow Bobby's music, how he synthesized all that. Yes, that's Bobby's proactiveness, but also you created an environment for him in which he could synthesize it on his own terms. And now I'm up on stage with Bobby. Like, sorry, this is a from one of the shows we did in New York.
Right.
Of Bobby's piece called Terminals, and that's me.
Oh yeah, I know.
Cracking a bullwhip.
Right.
And screaming "Yeehaw" at the top of my lungs in the middle of his piece while Jason plays drum sets and Bobby is playing spoons. And I'm like, there's no reason this should work. Right. Yet somehow, because of Bobby having been around all these different collage artists and like all these different musicians who pieced it. I mean, Julius pieced together "Stay On It" to me is kind of a collage piece. Like, there's weird elements that he just sort of like plucks out of somewhere else and tapes onto the end. And then you look at Morton Feldman, the Rothko Chapel, at the very end. There's that like little booty doody 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 thing that comes in at the end. You're like, where in the hell did that come from? That doesn't like, you just taped a Time magazine over the end of this, like Robert Rauschenberg, you know. And when I look at Bobby, I feel like he could not have been who he is had he not been pushed through the sort of extruder of your program.
Oh yeah, no, this is true, and this is other students like Bobby too over the years. Students that have gone on, not even to go on to have careers in music per se, but who still do music. Some of my most dedicated and devoted students that work the hardest, were not majors. Because music was obvious that music was so integral to their life that it was never going to go away in lieu of doing something else. Okay, I do something else. That's fine. I'm good at that. I'll be a doctor. No problem. And I want a good job so I can afford to buy all these instruments, you know. Yeah. And those people, so I did not teach in a typical, my teaching methods were not really traditional, even at the university level. I don't think. I mean, you know, I was relying on a lot of innate talent that I had for this stuff, but it was easy in lessons to get sidetracked from doing. Okay, here's how you do chromatic scales. You go up in C, you go down in C sharp, you go up in D, you go down in D, you know, that kind of thing. And here's all your harmonic minor scale. Or here's the great formulas. We're going to do these chromatic. Then it would break down because a student or something would come up with a piece I was just doing, working out with some composer. We get talking about it with the student, with Bobby. It's that, you know. And a matter of fact, Bobby, could you like play in this piece because we need, you know, that kind of thing would happen. And so the lessons were a lot of times that way. So my students, you know, I had students that definitely went on to have careers in music, successful careers. Whom I'm very proud of, many of my students. And I won't mention names because I'm, you know, there are too many. I mean, anyway. But the ensemble was we played the very first PASIC convention at the Eastman School of Music. We did Persifasa on the stage of the Eastman Theater.
Did they think you were crazy at PASIC? I mean, like at the very first PASIC, I mean,
John organized it, obviously. What's that, Doug?
I said, PASIC still thinks you're crazy.
Well, they don't.
I love your wife's color commentary here, by the way. This is amazing.
No. It was great. I mean, we got the audience, some of the audience, and on the stage in the middle, and we were around it. Yeah. We couldn't do it in the hall because of. But yeah, played it. And from that point on, I wrote articles for P&O. Yeah. I've been PASIC many times, and I don't know, but never was deeply involved with the organization because Well, again, I don't know, I was more composer oriented as a percussionist. So, I was president of Composers Forum in New York for a couple of years. Back in the day, I just didn't have the interest in the whole broad spectrum of percussion. And so I was very much involved with the research edition of Percussive Notes. It used to be a separate publication. You knew that? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I was on the editorial board for that with Jean-Charles Francois and several other people, Mike Udow, and we were, and probably Al Hadi, soliciting and peer reviewing articles, series about percussion writing and of all kinds, but it was legit. Of course, then PS did away with the research edition as a separate thing, tried to incorporate it into Percussive Notes, which was more not a successful thing. I mean, it became more, I don't know. So when that happened, I withdrew a little bit from the percussion PAS, and that just, I didn't withdraw. I just, I stopped doing that, and I became more interested in other things. But no, that we took the ensemble. I remember driving a van full of kids to St. Louis for the PAS. In Philadelphia, we went with my group from. Yeah.
Well, Jen, you have given me way more stuff than I can research and this is amazing. And I want to just ask you one final question. You've been very generous with your time, and then I'll let you go. What would you say has been, like, looking at Jan Williams now and then looking at Jan Williams when you started, what's some advice you would have given to Jan Williams when you first started this, like your teaching journey, your all of this stuff? What's a piece of advice you would have given to young Jan Williams of, like, hey, just do what you're doing, but keep an eye out for this?
Practice more.
Yeah.
Gee, Josh.
I'm sort of being selfish here, Jan. I'm looking for advice. I need your
I have always felt that I was very, very much in the right place at the right time. And that's that kind of thing, right? That I've always felt that I was very lucky that these opportunities came along when they did, that these people supported my work, both as a player, but also as a mentor, as a producer of concerts, contemporary music concerts and festivals. I'm always very appreciative that those opportunities were made. Being at the university in Buffalo, where I was free. I mean, there were no demands. I mean, when the faculty evaluations came off, and the students, it was always, just keep doing what you're doing, basically. And I don't know. I can't think of how it could have gone better. I mean, for me. I mean, I'm probably by far the oldest person you've had on your podcast.
How old are you, Jan? You can't be that old.
81 years old.
Joan Tower. I'm curious how old Joan Tower is, because.
Well, she's close.
All right, you two may be neck and neck for holding the record. You can fight it out with Joan, I suspect you'll lose because she's scrappy.
Lucky I can still remember some things. Don't ask me what I had for breakfast, but the old days come back pretty strongly. I have very, very, very memories. Yes, there's some stories, we could go on for.
Well, this I'll have to have you back on because this,
Yes, whatever.
we can choose something more specific to zero in on. But Jan, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that we can meet up at the Anchor Bar and have toast a beer and do, pretend we know what it's like to be in person again. And just I hope we can get together and play again. I don't know. Like I'm so I'm struck having been locked inside now since March. I haven't seen my bandmates but once, or twice now. I think since March. And we need to have a big, like, not PASIC, but a big convention of all of our friends just to get together and hang out at the Anchor Bar, and like that's how we're gonna ring in the new era coming up here.
Can I close out with one Anchor Bar story?
Please, yeah.
It was after Xenakis was in Buffalo for June in Buffalo in the mid-70s. Xenakis, Morty invited Xenakis. We did a concert where I conducted Aonta, and then we played Persifasa at the Art Gallery in Buffalo. And Xenakis was at the concert. He was there for around for a whole week. After that concert, we went to the Anchor Bar, which we did often. At that time, it's been remodeled now, but at that time, there was a separate room that could hold about 30 or 40 people, and we would always grab that room and go back there after the concert. So we're sitting on this big table. Wings are coming, and beers, Jenny cream ales. As Xenakis and more.
Nothing but the best for Xenakis, Jan. Nothing but the best for Xenakis. Roll out the red carpet. Bring me the Jenny cream ales. Nothing but the best.
Morty and Giannis were talking back in the and at one point, Morty says, Giannis, how about you write a piece for Jan and Nora Post, the old boys in our group, it was news to me. I'm like, is he asking Xenakis to be? Really? I'm thinking, well, Xenakis will I'll think about it, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And he says, yeah, sure, I'll write a piece. 2 months later, I get this piece in the mail to Martin. Mm-hmm. So that's how that piece happened, at the Anchor Bar, over a plate of hot wings.
That just goes to show. So here's the piece of advice that Jan, when somebody asks you the question, like, what piece of advice would you give to young Jan Williams? The answer is, when you're at the Anchor Bar, do not be afraid to ask Xenakis to write you a piece. That's the answer, Jan.
After the wings and Jenny cream ale.
Right, yes. Be sure you sort of grease the skids with the Jenny cream ale and the wings. But anyway, Jan, I appreciate your time. This has been amazing.
Okay, guys, have a good one.
Please tell your wife I said hello and thank you.
We will. Take care.
Stay safe and
Give
stay
my
safe.
best to the other guys, and I hope you get together again real soon.
I hope so too. But Jan, stay healthy, okay? And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you too.
All right,
okay.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in Pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.